Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about board presses and when they can be good and when they are not. Because this is one of those complicated topics. It's one of those things that's going to be a bit nuanced. And what I will say is that we're not going to get into the equipped bench pressing aspects of the board press at all, because these days, very few powerlifters compete equipped. More people compete raw. More people care about their raw strength in general, and that's a very niche community. However, when we're dealing with stuff like the board press, we are still dealing with a partial that is used by a lot of raw lifters, by people for different purposes, working around injuries, recovery, things like that. Now, in my case, I'm doing them for some specificity reasons, but I want to point out here something that people need to be aware of. When we're talking about doing partial range of motion exercises, and I don't mean minor partials like you've trimmed a little bit of range of motion off. In this case, I'm using a 4 board. That's about 6 inches taken off the range of motion. Okay, I am barely doing a half rep, maybe a hair more. Right? If you look at the distance there, I'm doing just over a half rep. I'm losing almost half of the range of motion. And I'm doing reps with a weight that I really wouldn't be able to do the number of reps and sets I'm doing with. And this is after doing other work. So what we need to remember when we look at hypertrophy, for example, what do we know from studies? Well, that usually if you use a heavier weight for a much shorter range of motion, when things are cut to, half reps or less, or even quarter reps, particularly when we go to quarter reps, they actually produce less hypertrophy. Right? They usually produce less hypertrophy in the studies. So if our primary goal is hypertrophy and this is all that we are doing, you can expect abysmal results. So what I'm going to tell people is that usually if you're doing this as an exercise where you're trying to build muscles, and in this case largely my triceps, you are going to need to do some longer range of motion work with it. Now, the interesting point, my range of motion on a board press is some people's actual range of motion on a bench press. The thing that we have to consider with the bench press is that the bench press is very rarely a true full range of motion exercise. All of us can get the joint deeper than we can on a bench, particularly as we get bigger. You got a big rib cage like me, or you build big pecs, we arch it all, we start cutting the range of motion down pretty quick. The bench press itself, other than making contact with the chest, is a pretty ambiguous range of motion. We're taking that another degree further with this, though. And I'll go so far as to say that if you're trying to maximize chest hypertrophy, this would not be a wise idea. What we're dealing with here is specificity with joint angles. Number one. Then we'll get into some stuff about shoulder health in a minute too, because that's a big part of a lot of what I do these days. Because again, this is actually something that a lot of people can do who have shoulder injuries. They find that they can board press really heavy. They might not even use this particular board. They might go down to a 2 board, 3 board. They can find something that they can get away with. And that's the other thing. You will see people out there talk about, oh, not touching your chest on the bench press. Well, that's stupid. And I'm not saying there isn't therapeutic reasons why people with certain shoulder issues, or someone with a really small chest who the range of motion might hurt them, wouldn't want to do a partial, but skipping touching your chest is a bad idea, because you have no way to control the range of motion. And if you have an injury and you're trying to do a partial, what's going to happen if you accidentally go too low? Because if you're doing partial reps, you're going to be moving more weight than you would normally move through a full range of motion. It's going to be heavier than you can really handle at the bottom. And if you have some sort of inflammation or shoulder issue already, and you accidentally let the bar drop too low, what's going to happen? You're going to rip your shit. You're going to snap something up. So telling people not to touch their chest is the stupidest thing you could possibly do. It is stupid, and anyone giving that advice is stupid. We have devices we've invented to let you do this safely. That's why it's stupid. Not that the limited range of motion in some contexts, for particularly people with certain shoulder problems or shoulder inflammation, who also have maybe a small chest, you might need to stop 3 inches short. But you need to use boards, or in this case a bench block which simulates the board press. Right? This would be your choice. This is what you would want to do. And there is something to be said for this for shoulder health. If you want to do some extra heavy pressing that's easy on your shoulders, because you want to do more total training volume and recover, which is what I do, tons of my training right now is geared around putting minimal stress on my shoulders. As a master's lifter, lifting really heavy weights week in, week out with very high training volumes. I even do my speed squats with a safety squat bar just so that my shoulders don't get taxed from supporting a bar. Because I do up to 12 sets of those every week on my speed days, right? Not even counting my max days. So we use these different tools to make our shoulders healthy, to not inflame them, to not cause issues, so we can train harder, right? So that we can save our shoulders when we need to do a really heavy bench all the way to the chest with a wider grip. So that's one reason. Lets me get a lot more heavy pressing volume in that I need for my triceps. Now for me personally, I feel this in my chest tremendously. But what's going on with it? Why would it benefit triceps? Well, let's say that I'm doing other exercises to build my entire tricep, which I am, right? Dips, JM presses, speed benching, all that. I do plenty of JM presses, which actually hit these same heads of the tricep through a full range of motion. It's very, very similar in terms of stress on the muscle. It's just that I go all the way down with it. Well, the thing that we run into is that we also have muscle fibers that are specific to certain joint angles. And in this case, I want to make sure that I am hitting those and fully fatiguing those, not just the ones at the bottom. Because I personally tend to stick on the top half of my bench press. Therefore, that's indicative that the muscles at the top half could be a combination of pectoral and tricep. Struggle with the lockout. Well, I need the fibers that are specific to that to get some additional training. It's not that this is going to fully develop the tricep on its own. We do other tricep work with it, because if I'm doing something like this is a specialization. It means that I need the tricep specialization. So I'm obviously doing full range of motion tricep movements also, and full range of motion pec movements. But in this case, this is ensuring that the muscle fibers that are oftentimes not taxed maximally with the rep work, because the leverages are easier on the top half, some of those muscle fibers may not be getting fully fatigued, and that could explain why they're not maximally growing, and I might not be generating maximum force there. It doesn't mean we don't need to train the ones at the bottom too, because we need them to generate maximum force. But as they get fatigued on the way up, we need to make sure that these others are able to follow through. So in this case, it's just ensuring maximum tricep development on the heads of the triceps that I need to work through the full bench press. And it's doing so in a way that is easy on the shoulder joints, because we're not going all the way down with it. Okay? And we have to look at something like this and say, okay, well, this wouldn't work on its own. This would not be the best way to grow your triceps by itself. Although there are some very strong lifters who do feel that it is. Right? There are guys who feel that it is. There are lifters out there who say, I do board presses with 700 pounds. What use do I have for doing an extension? I mean, fair play to that guy. We could argue biomechanically he's not completely right, but it seems to be working for guys like that who say, I've heard of guys saying things like that. And, and they bench 500 pounds. Well, it's hard to argue with their results, even though we could argue biomechanically, maybe you would benefit from throwing something else in there. But, what do you do? They've got an interesting argument, but I would say this is a supplemental lift. And we have to treat it like that. It is what it is. It's a supplemental lift that allows us to get some really heavy pressing volume in to build certain parts of the tricep that are easy on our shoulders, and to prepare us for holding and handling heavier weights through more volume through the points where we tend to stick or slow down, right? Just to build that specificity of training. But I want to make it very, very clear, this is a supplement to training. This is not a replacement for full range of motion training. Okay, therein lies the difference. It is not a replacement. It is an addition. And when you understand it for what it is, and it's a very specific addition, it makes sense. Don't try to do this on its own and think that this is going to build your triceps by itself to their maximum size and strength. It won't. but it could help them get there as part of a larger program. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.